Can you,
Okay,
there you go.
there it comes.
Can you mute everyone, please? Is it? All right. Good
Yes.
evening, everyone. Welcome back. We have just completed the first tablet of the law of the Ten Commandments, which is the first three commandments, love of God. And now we will be dealing with the start of the second tablet of the Ten Commandments, which is love of neighbor. As we have learned, both are inseparable. Now, the fourth commandment simply reads, honor thy father and thy mother. But as we already learned last time, we dig much deeper into what the words of the commandments say. We look into the spirit of the law. So the fourth commandment actually covers all relationship that we have, our relationship with our neighbors, with our family, even the relationship with the institutions made by man, the relationship of one nation to another. All of this will be covered under this fourth commandment. And that is what we are going to take up tonight. Relationship is very important, uh, especially with our relatives and those in our immediate family. I know that somehow we are experiencing some difficulties with our relationship. That's almost inevitable because, especially in the family, we are dealing with the millennials and the generation X, Y, or Z, whatever generation they are. We still need to be able to uh, communicate with them and relate with them in their own newfound freedom or culture. So this is not an easy thing to keep an harmonious relationship. So we are not talking about just relationship with our parents now. More importantly, relationship with our children and with our friends, okay, with our neighbors. Now, we cannot give up, as you know, for a failed relationship. A Christian should never despair about a failed relationship. A Christian should always exert everything that he can do to repair a relationship, no matter how difficult it has been disrupted. Why do we need to do that? Because, loving God means loving our neighbor. We cannot just love those who are so likable to us or those we agree with. We are even commanded to love our enemies. So this is very important. Therefore, we must maintain harmonious relationship with everyone. At the start of man's history, relationship with God was disrupted. And you know the consequence of that. The harmony that we have with our Creator was totally destroyed, and so we were banished. And so we all acquired a fallen nature. Now, we also know that if we have a disrupted relationship with our neighbor, it has consequences that we have to deal with. So it's very important that we understand and appreciate the guidance of the church on how we can maintain harmonious and happy relationship with everyone, regardless of the difficulties we encounter. Okay? So if we go to slide number 2 now, we will see that the fourth commandment is the foundation of the second tablet of the law. It deals with all kinds of relationship. Just as the first commandment is the foundation of the first tablet of the law, so is the fourth commandment the foundation of all the rest of the commandments because it all deals about our neighbor. All right. So it deals with how with our relationship with our fellow man, with how we can uh, listen to authorities, institute, all right off the bat, we should understand that all authorities are instituted by God Himself. So we have to submit to authorities to a certain to a big extent, but to a certain limit. Okay, so we are all family. We are all members of the family of God. And so, as such, just as when we have some disruptions in relationship in the family, I'm sure you feel we almost always feel devastated about broken relationship, right? So we need God's help, and we need never to give up, never to give up. Okay, so, firstly, we must understand that relationship must always be based on equality. All of us are created equal. So, even if there are authorities instituted in in any individual or in any institution, it does not in any way affect our equality with everyone. Okay? So, because all authority comes from God, all authority was instituted by God Himself. And then relationship requires uh, obedience to a big extent. So, relationship must be based on justice, respect. Most of all, relationship must be based on love, unconditional love, committed love. It must be based on mercy. It must be based on compassion. And of course, relationship requires constant communication with everyone we relate with. All of these are building blocks for good relationship. So let's go to the next slide. The fundamental relationship that we are going to cover tonight on the next slide, it enumerates right there, of course, firstly, relationship between husband and wives, relationship between parents and children, relationship between the citizens, we as citizens, with our rulers, the ones running the institution made by man. Relationship between masters and servants, which include, employer-employee relationship, subject and authority relationship. Okay, so all of this are fundamental relationship that we cannot avoid dealing with. And we must have a very good attitude about dealing with relationship. All right, so we go to the next slide and we first start with the family because the relationship in the family is primordial. Family charity, as we say, begins at home. One thing we should understand is that any other institutions cannot usurp the authority of the parents in the family. So let's read here. Because the family is designed by God. It has been designed by God and instituted by God prior to the state, and therefore it cannot be reinvented. We cannot redefine family. This is the reason why the church can never countenance or sanction gay marriages because a family is supposed to be, as in paragraph 2202 reads, a man and a woman united in marriage, together with their children. That's what forms the family. This institution is prior to any recognition by public authority, which has an obligation to recognize it. Okay? So it's very clear that the family does not hold its right from the state. The state is just man-made. The family is from God Himself. He designed the family himself. So let's keep that in mind as we proceed with our discussion tonight. Let's go to the next slide. We must understand that the family is the nucleus of society. It is the original cell of social life. So it is, the families are the ones that comprise society. And all the societies comprise the nation, the world. All right? So paragraph 2207 reads, the family is the original cell of social life. Authority, stability, and a life of relationships within the family constitute the foundations for freedom, security, and fraternity within society. So the family is the community in which, from childhood, one can learn moral values. So our moral values are first formed in the family. So there's a lot of responsibility given to the parents in the family. This is where they learn to begin to honor God, to learn, to understand moral values, make good use of freedom. So family life is an initiation into life in society. So the parents have a great responsibility in uh, maintaining a family. The children, especially in their tender age, are always following, naturally following the parents. So the parents are like taking them into an elevator ride. You know, the home is just like an elevator. It the way it's being run by the parents is very important, very vital, because when as you know, it he brings up the children. So when he elevates them going up, the children go up with them. If he goes down in the elevator, the children go down with them. They carry them. So the responsibility of the parents in the family cannot be overemphasized. It's so important, right? Because if the family becomes dysfunctional, it affects the whole of society. If the society is composed of dysfunctional families, then we have dysfunctional society. All right. So it is in the family that the children learn their faith for the first time, their moral value and their moral values for the first time. It is the first church, the family itself, the home. Okay. So there's one thing that we must really emphasize and cannot overstress. And this is on the next slide. We are going to take this principle over and over. Principle of subsidiarity. It's misspelled there, subsidiarity. The family must be helped and defended by appropriate social measures. Where families cannot fulfill their responsibilities, other social bodies have the duty of helping them. Take note, only in the event that the families cannot fulfill their responsibilities, that social bodies would have the duty to help. Other than that, it's not supposed to intervene or usurp the authority of the people of the parents running the family. So they have the duty of helping them and supporting them in the institution of the family. This is following the principle of subsidiarity. This time it's correctly spelled there. Larger communities should take care not to usurp the family's prerogatives or interfere in its life. This is very important because right now we are experiencing an over extended authority by the state, either national or local. It does not take a village. It does take only the parents to really bring up a desirable family. That is the principle of subsidiarity. The state has a specific uh, duty to foster the family, but not to usurp the duties and responsibilities of the family. So, but secularists ignore this basic principle of subsidiarity because secularists think that the state has to be in charge of everything, even the way you run your family. Okay, so it overextends its authority most of the time. So we see now, and I'm sure you must have already noticed that the role of the state has been magnified. The state, instead of just fostering the good of the families, they are fostering everything they would do for the good of society. Then that would not be moral in any sense. Okay, we will get back on this in detail in a little bit. Okay, but now let's go to the next slide and look at the relationship between the husband and wife first, because they are going to be the parents, husband and wife. Oh my, you have your picture there. You see the husband having that white uh, poster there, and the wife having that husband poster there. The wife was smiling. You know why the husband's face is not showing? Probably is frowning because probably the wife was domineering him, and I know that we have these relationships in the family that are often very controversial. But let's look at the basis of relationship first between husband and wife before we go any further. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 21 to 25. Here's the first sentence is the most important. Be subordinate to one another out of reverence for Christ. It should have ended there, but the thing is, look at this. Wives should be subordinate to their husbands as to the Lord. That's fine. For the husband is the head of his wife, just as Christ is head of the church. He himself the Savior of the body. As the church is subordinate to Christ, so wives should be subordinate to their husbands in everything. Oh, I'm sure wives wouldn't want to read that. But it doesn't really mean that literally, because look at the very first sentence. Be subordinate to one another. One should not rule the other. So who is the boss? Nobody is the boss. There is it's not one relationship uh, higher than the other. No, they are partners. They are soulmates. They are equal. All right. So the husband may be the head of the family because, as you know, when you refer to the family, you use the last name of the husband, like it's the Moya family. But it doesn't mean that I am the boss in the family. Far from it. I assure you that. Then it says, husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church and handed himself over for her. So let's look at this even deeper. This was written by Paul, but we should always look, whenever we read the scripture, we have to look into the culture that was prevailing at that time. All right. During the early days of uh, the church was pretty much Jewish culture. And under the Jewish culture, uh, wives are like, unfortunately, second citizens, and even the children. That's why when they counted the number of people who were there during the miracle of the multiplication of the bread. They counted only the male parents, and the children and the wives were not even counted. So it's more than 4,000, it's more than 5,000. Why? Because the culture at that time, very unfortunate, was that wives and children are second citizens. All right. But thank God we have been we have been civilized in that regard. So it's very important. So husband is the head, but he is not the boss. The husband and the wife, they are equals. They play different roles. There shouldn't be any power struggle between them. They must find their own balance and on taking of initiative according to one's natural gift. Sometimes the wife can be much smarter than the husband. That's fine. So she plays a role that is appropriate to her capacity and capability, and the other way around. So it's not a power struggle, it's a partnership. They are soulmates. And when the husband exercises authority as head of the family, it's not because he is the patriarch or he's the macho. Okay. So the authority of the husband should not be equated in any way to power. And obedience should never be confused with inferiority. Just because you are obedient, it doesn't mean that you're inferior. No, not at all. Jesus Christ was obedient to God the Father, even unto death. But he is equal with the Father. He is equal with the Holy Spirit. So authority is not might. It is a right that is endowed by God, and their right to be obeyed is derived from their own obedience to God. So that is the theology of all of this. And the only basis for authority is love. Authority should never in any way contradict equality, just like the Trinity. Christ's obedience to the Father, they're all equal. And authority entails responsibility. Okay? Husbands, love your wives. I'd like to quote this from President Roosevelt. He said, when you have some misunderstanding with your wife, this is how, this is what his advice was. And I quote, women are not meant to be understood. Maybe they were having another misunderstanding. Women are not meant to be understood. They are meant to be loved. So husbands, love your wives, even as Christ loved the church. All right. So let's go to the next slide. We go into the essence of marriage. The very essence of marriage is unity and procreation. So it's unity and procreated. Paragraph 2201, marriage and the family are ordered to the good of the spouses and to the procreation and education of children. That is the essence of marriage. That is why if the couple is going to marry and they do not have any intention to procreate, to have children, that marriage is annullable because it loses the essence of marriage, which is to establish a family. Okay. What about those who are no longer capable of procreation at old age? Of course, we're not. Okay. When you're past 50, probably past late 40s, yes, you can still have that fulfill the essence of marriage because actually you are fulfilling the unity essence of marriage, that it is a partnership of their whole life. Okay. Um, the, the same-sex marriage cannot fulfill the essence of procreation. It defeats procreation. So we must understand that marriage is an exchange of person. It is self-giving. It's not just a contract. It is a lifetime commitment. Therefore, it is not dissoluble. So let's review the indissolubility of marriage. Let's go to the next slide. We have taken this up, but it's good to review it now. And let's look at Matthew chapter 19 on the next slide. Matthew chapter 19, verses 4 to 6 and 9. Just to make it really very clear, it is in scripture that the marriage cannot be dissolved. Have you not read that from the beginning the Creator made them male and female? For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no human being must separate. I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, and then the parenthesis, unless the marriage is unlawful, we'll get into that, and marries another, commits adultery. That is as clear as it can be. It's also stated in Luke chapter 16, verse 18, also as clear as it can be. Everyone who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery. And the one who marries a woman divorced from her husband commits adultery. That is a plain statement in scripture, in the Gospel of Matthew and in the Gospel of Luke. There's only one exception that was provided in the Gospel of Matthew. That parenthesis there, unless the marriage is unlawful. In some translations, they put in there unless there is unfaithfulness and so on and so forth. But if you look into the original language and the context in which this was written, it refers to unlawful marriages. What are those unlawful marriages? Those that were solemnized, entered into without mutual consent. Then that is annullable. And many other the marriages between first close relatives. Okay, they can be annulled. So let's not confuse about annulment with divorce. Because in the Catholic Church, we do allow annulment of marriage. Annulment of marriage will be decreed by the church not to dissolve a marriage, but to declare that there was not a valid marriage from the very beginning. Okay? So a canon law priest would be able to expound on this, I'm sure. Okay, so paragraph 2384 reads, divorce is a grave offense against the natural law. It claims to break the contract to which the spouses freely consented to live with each other till death. Divorce does injury to the covenant of salvation of which sacramental marriage is the sign. Contracting a new union, even if it is recognized by civil law, adds to the gravity of the rupture. The remarried spouse is then in a situation of public and permanent adultery. We will take this up even more because there are many, even in the Catholic Church, who love to be embraced in the church, but are in a complicated marital situation brought about by mostly uh, ignorance of the moral law of the church, um, explained by the church. We really have to work on our marriage as much as possible. Every husband and wife, bring in, when they get married, they bring in their past experiences with them in their marriage. And together they take who they were and what they have learned and create something unique out of it. So they have their own baggages that they brought into the marriage. They have to be able to blend it and to create something unique in their relationship. So you have uh, your own character, your own background, and all that, and you are going to live together with someone who has his unique baggage, his unique background. So you have to be able to blend it together. That's what uh, causes a lot of friction in the relationship. You have to form a new family. So they're not supposed to abolish their past or the people they once were. No, they bring that into the marriage, but they take what was good from it and leave behind. They should be ready to leave behind what no longer works. So everything they have learned in their marriage finds its fulfillment in the life that they forged together. Sometimes it takes years and years and years. There are some couples who have been together for 50 years and still adjusting to each other, right? Still some adjustment are being made. It's an ongoing blending of your differences. So, but over time, they raise their children to live out this new life that they have created and their own family, right? So, what about those who have been divorced and in a very complicated marital situation? I'd like to share this with you. In 2016, from 2014 to 2015, a synod of bishops was called by Pope Francis. Okay, they worked for a couple of years, 2014 to 2015. The synod is called the Synod of the Family. So Saint Francis want us to look into the situation of everyone in the Catholic Church, especially those with complicated marital situations. So there were a lot of speculation that probably there will be a lot of changes in the teaching of the church on divorce. It did not happen. Probably the church would now consider uh, authorizing gay marriages. It did not happen. But something great really happened. Something really great. So after the Synod of Bishops, that took about 2 years, the Pope Francis uh, issued what you call a post synod apostolic exhortation. And the title is Amoris Laetitia, the joy of love. I'd like to share this with you. So, after 2 years, what has the church come up with on the synods? Amoris Laetitia. It talks about the role of the church in guiding the church, the people of the church, in pastoring those in complicated situations, avoiding a cold, bureaucratic morality in dealing with sensitive issues, encouraging the faithful who find themselves in complicated situations. So right at the outset, the document is saying, let's not be self-righteous. Love everyone in the church. Let's not be sanctimonious. Let's not be judgmental. Let's not have that holier than thou attitude when you deal with these people. Rather, the whole message is that it's about time that the church learn how to be really loving, how to be compassionate, how to be embracing and not condemning. There is no condemnation in Christ. So the exhortation is to, you know, remind everyone that the church is a hospital for sinners. We have to embrace people who are in complicated marital situations. Then it reads on, no one can be condemned forever. The church has the responsibility of helping them. So you cannot ostracize them. You cannot spread gossips about them in the church. It's not productive. It's not helpful. It's not holy. Okay. It must be ever ready to understand, forgive, hope, and above all, in, integrate, even if it cannot confirm their own ideas or desire. So we will be integrating them even if we cannot confirm their own ideas. You know, so there will not be any tolerance on the part of the church, but there will always be compassion and love on the part of the church. Okay, you cannot condemn these people in this situation into helplessness. We have to learn how to listen and know the entirety of their situation. And then it admonishes, share the light to help them better understand their situation and discover a path for them for personal growth. Listen to them with sensitivity and serenity, with a sincere desire, their plight and their point of view in order to help them live better lives and to recognize their proper place in the church. So the message is the primacy of charity and mercy. So the Amoris Laetitia offers us a framework and a setting which help us to avoid a cold bureaucratic morality in dealing with more sensitive issues. We have a lot of sensitive issues among our brothers and sisters in the church. Instead, it sets us in the context of a pastoral discernment filled with merciful love, which is ever ready to understand, forgive, accompany, hope, and above all, integrate. So we don't excommunicate them anymore. We embrace them, we integrate them in the church. That is the mindset which should prevail in the church and lead us to open our hearts to those living in the outermost fringes of society. Then the Pope says, I encourage the faithful who find themselves in complicated situations to speak confidently with their pastors or with other lay people whose lives are committed to the Lord. They may not always encounter in them a confirmation of their own ideas or desires, but they will surely receive some light to help them better understand their situation and discover a path to personal growth. I also encourage the church pastors to listen to them with sensitivity and serenity, with a sincere desire to understand their plight and their point of view in order to help them live better lives and recognize their proper place in the church. So for 2 years, the synod of bishop deliberated on this, and no teaching of the church was changed, but the approach of the church in regard to what it considers a transgression of the moral guidance of the church is very different now. We are more on the side of sympathizing with them and embracing them. So that is the whole, that is actually the main theme of the papacy of Pope Francis, inclusiveness, but not tolerance. Okay, inclusiveness with love. All right. So, but there are some difficult situations in marriages. Then the only solution is not to get a divorce, but what? We learned this also. Let's go to the next slide. Legal separation. Okay. Even as early as the time of Paul, Paul addressed this problem in the family. He said in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 10 to 11, to the married, however, I give this instruction, not I, but the Lord. A wife should not separate from her husband. And if she does separate, she must either remain single or become reconciled to her husband. And a husband should not divorce his wife. So that's what we call legal separation. Okay, because sometimes you come to a point where it's absolutely not workable anymore because of probably irreconcilable differences. That should not be a ground of divorce. But you can get into that realization. Maybe it's too late by then. You already have children. You already have properties, and so the church does look into this. And so we see in here where the church would allow civil divorce, but not countenance that divorce at the same time. Paragraph 2383. The separation of spouses while maintaining the marriage bond can be legitimate. It's okay in certain cases provided for by canon law. If civil divorce remains the only possible way of ensuring certain legal rights, because they already have children, the care of the children, because they have to separate, they can't live together anymore. What about the children? So there has to be a legal adjudication of that. Care of the children or the protection of inheritance, the properties they have accumulated. Then it can be, the civil divorce can be tolerated and does not constitute a moral offense. So if you get a civil divorce in order to adjudicate certain legal rights, such as the care of the children or how you are going to divide, manage the properties, then the church does allow that you go on a civil divorce. As a matter of fact, if you are going to annul marriage in deference to the civil authority, because there would be a conflict because we don't allow divorce, the church, before a church annulment would be decreed, will have to require you to have a civil divorce. I'm sure you're aware of that. The annulment process cannot proceed without a civil divorce. So there are cases when the church would consider a civil divorce as not constituting a moral offense. I hope we get that clear. All right. So let's go to the next slide now. The different duties of the parents. Duties of the parents: respect and love their children. Respect is not just due to the parents. The parents should learn how to respect their children too. So if parents commit a mistake and he or she realizes it, the parents should learn how to say sorry, how to apologize to their children. That's almost unheard of in a patriarchal family, in patriarchal family. But that is a teaching of the church. That is how you respect your children. If you have committed some wrong to your children, then apologize. Say you're sorry to your children. A very important duty is to educate their children. The essential duty to guide them in the ways of the Lord. It's very important. Okay. And by the way, loving your children, sometimes we wonder, you have provided. The parents would always say, I have provided everything that I have complied with my duty to support them. I have given them everything that they have wanted. Why are they still rebelling against me? So we have to understand. I've been working too hard. I just don't have enough time to deal with them. But whenever I am with them, I give them quality time. Don't you always hear that for those parents who really don't have much time for their children. Okay, but understand this. The best expression of love is time. The more time you give to something, the more you reveal its importance and value. If you want to know someone's priorities, just look at how they use their time. So when you give someone your time, you are giving them a portion of your life. And that portion of your life you'll never get back. So your time is your life. That is why the greatest gift you can give to your children or to someone is your time. It is not enough to say relationships are important. We must prove it by investing time in them. So words alone are worthless. My children, our love should not be just words and talk. It must be true love, which shows itself in action. No relationship takes time and effort. The best way to spell love is Time. Time. Many have said to me, I don't understand my wife and kids. I provide everything they need. What more could they want? They want you, your eyes, your ears, your time, your attention, your presence, your focus, your time. Nothing can take that place. So the length of time that you spend with your children constitutes quality time. So quality time, quantity time makes quality time. Okay. So uh, I'm sure many of us do not deal with this uh, problem of spending more time with our children. Most of us are grandparents at this time, but we can advise our children how to deal with their grandparents. Okay. All right. Because it's important that we always have a dialogue with our children. So, educating them in the ways of the Lord, and then we'll skip that a little bit and we'll get back to that. Discipline, but not provoke them. So, in many families, the husband is like patriarchal. He's the head, he dictates, he's commanding. So, no, it says never provoke your children. Okay. That means you provoke them when they feel that you are not respecting their own right too, without at the same time tolerating them. Of course, it is the duty of the parents to provide for their physical and spiritual need. Okay, to advise them, but avoid undue pressure in the choice of profession and spouse. Okay, now so we don't go that far in choosing for them who is going to be the wife of your son, or is going to be the husband of your, you know, daughter. No, you don't go to that extent. Give them the right to exercise that. Okay, and the choice of profession too. Now let's go to the next slide. This is very important. The right and duty of parents to educate their children are primordial and inalienable. Paragraph 22-21. The role of parents in education is of such importance that it is almost impossible to provide an adequate substitute. The right of duty of parents to educate their children are primordial and inalienable. Paragraph 22-23, parents have the first responsibility for their children. Don't leave it to the school. They're gonna wreck their moral values, most of the schools anyway nowadays. They bear witness to this responsibility first by creating a home where tenderness, forgiveness, respect, fidelity, and disinterested service are the rule. Parents have a grave responsibility to give good examples to their children. So you don't tell your children, practice what I preach, but I don't need to practice what I preach because I'm the parent. That's very scandalizing to the children. By knowing how to acknowledge their own failings to their children, now they're going. Learn how to say, I apologize, I'm sorry. Parents will be better able to guide and correct them. Now, this is the next thing that I want to share with you. The primacy of the family, especially in sex education. In Familiaris Consortio issued by Pope John Paul II, he stated, the right and duty of parents to give education is essential since it is connected with the transmission of human life. Your transmission of human life is not complete. It is a continuing process. It includes the education, your duty of educating your children. It is the original and primary with regard to the educational roles of others on account of the uniqueness of the loving relationship between parents and children. And it is irreplaceable and inalienable and therefore incapable of being entirely delegated to others or usurped by others. Unfortunately, I'm sure you have observed this yourself. Government has to a great extent appropriated their role under the pretext of a school curriculum. Now, the school curriculum that they have, examined them, parents. See, it includes almost always sex education. Sometimes this really leads to deformation of consciences. In societies, professional associations of sex educators, sex counselors, and sex therapists are operating. Parents should regard such associations with great caution. Another abuse occurs whenever sex education is given to children by teaching them all the intimate details of genital relationship, even in a graphic way. This is often motivated by wanting to provide education for safe sex, above all in relation to the spread of AIDS. In this situation, parents must reject the promotion of so-called safe sex or safer sex, a dangerous and immoral policy based on the deluded theory that the condom can provide adequate protection from AIDS. Parents must insist on continence outside marriage and fidelity in marriage as the only true and secure education for the prevention of this contagious disease. Teach them continence, okay, outside marriage. Don't have sex until you get married. If the parents, it is the parents' right that their children should not be obliged to attend courses in school on this subject, which are not in harmony with their religious and moral convictions. The church is firmly opposed to an often widespread form of imparting sex education associated or dissociated from moral principles. Sex education, which is a basic right and duty of parents, must always be carried out under their attentive guidance, whether at home or in educational centers chosen and controlled by them. That's Familiaris Consortium. But what's happening now in many secular schools, there's a promotion of books that, support Black Panther, support for, uh, if you are not supportive of BL, Black Lives Matter, that means you are you are superstitious, you are a part of a cult, that the police are bad, you know, demoralizing them if they believe in God. Some of them promote communism or and even atheism. That if you believe in God, then you are cultic. You know, some of them are being taught. You may not be aware of this in public schools. They're being taught some social, uh, Marxism, communist values, and then if you review their curriculum, it included in their curriculum is the indoctrination of children in the so-called critical race theory. Okay, uh, that if you are not believing in the LGBT, you are homophobic, and so on. And there are some libraries that pass on BLM pamphlets, but refusing to pass Blue Lives Matter. Yes. So, and they even conduct, sometimes they even conducted survey as to whom the children would vote in an election. What is that for? Okay. And then we have a confusion now as to the gender pronoun that we should be using. He, she, or what? We'll probably come up with another gender pronoun so that it can be, so that they can eliminate the word he or she, because the distinction is now almost completely blurred. Okay, so in this, I tell you, when you vote, always pay attention to people you vote in the school board, because they are the ones influencing our children. We should really scrutinize the background of candidates for the school board. Sometimes we just take it for granted. And it's very important because all of this, many of these are happening in the school board. But so much of that. Okay? You can deal with that more fully in your discussion. Next slide now. The duties of children to respect and obey their parents. Of course, we all know that. Respect for parents derives from their gratitude toward those who, by the gift of their life, their love, and their work, have brought their children into the world. Filial respect is shown by true docility. A wise son hears his father's instruction, but paragraph 22:17, important. As long as a child lives at home with his parents, they don't realize this. As long as they live with their parents, they should obey their parents if all that they ask of him when it is for his good or that of his family. But of course, if a child is convinced in his conscience that it would be morally wrong to obey a particular order, then he must not do so. Okay, next slide. We're running out of time, really, because I tried to jam it all together. This is all relationship. The duties of the children to support the parents in need. There will have to be a reversal one day of role. It is the duty of the children, maybe they don't realize it, that they have the duty to support the parents in need, in situations of distress, sickness, loneliness, or old age. The fourth commandment reminds grown children of their responsibility toward their parents. As much as they can, they must give them material and moral support in old age and in times of illness, loneliness, or distress. All right, next slide. Duties of citizens, we all know that you have to obey lawful authorities, but there's an exception. It is contained in the catechism that we should pay our taxes, that we should exercise our right to vote. There is a difference between avoidance of taxes and evasion of taxes. So avoidance is allowed by availing of the exemptions allowed by law. But it is our duty to pay our taxes in an honest way. And we have the role in the political community. As President Kennedy stated, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. You have to contribute to whatever you can contribute for the good of the country. And of course, we have the duty to defend our own country in times of war. Okay. Next slide. Duties of nations among each other. This is very important. Paragraph 2242. You are not obliged to obey all the laws, civil laws, because any of the civil laws are immoral, this paragraph admonition should apply. The citizen is obliged in conscience not to follow the directives of civil authorities when they are contrary to the demands of the moral order, to the fundamental rights of persons, or the teachings of the gospel. Refusing obedience to civil authorities when their demands are contrary to those of an upright conscience finds its justification in the distinction between serving God and serving the political community. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, and to God the things that are God. We must obey God rather than men. So any law that is passed that is contrary to the law of God must not be obeyed. Use your imagination on that. Next slide. Okay. Finally, duties of the nations, they are always to assist one another. The other things must be subordinate. The more prosperous the nations are, they are obliged to extend help to those who are not as prosperous as they are. We must welcome our foreigner in search of security and means of livelihood. Immigration is good. The church is for immigration, but of course for legal immigration, right? As long as we can have a liberal and more embracive immigration, but let that be instituted in our law first, and will not tolerate in any way transgressions of the existing immigration law. Okay, and of course, know the principle of subsidiarity, which we have already expounded it. The civil government should never interfere and usurp the community of a lower court. So that brings us to an end. I'm sorry we went a little past time. We have gone to the end. Next slide. And now, next slide, please. The discussion that we are going to take up in our discussion group. Have you experienced disruptions of relationship in the family? How did you deal with them? It's optional if you want to share your personal life on this, but the purpose is for us to understand how we apply the moral guidance of the church in repairing disrupted relationship. Have your children or grandchildren complained about religious or political impositions at school? So what did you do about them? And then what would you do to help those in complicated marital situations to live better lives and recognize their proper place in the church? So let's now break out into our discussion group and have a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Jess.
Please turn off the recording. Have you turned off the recording, Susan?
Yes.
Bear with us because Girly is not with us tonight. Yeah, we're still okay.
We will go into a breakout rooms into 3 groups.
It's still
Okay.
recording.